What if I told you that getting banned from iRacing made me a better driver and was arguably the best thing to happen to me in sim racing? Yeah, I know this sounds insane. Hear me out. The quick background story is that I've actually been IP banned from iRacing twice. There's a rule in their sporting code where you're not allowed to consistently be negative towards the game or criticize it too frequently. I broke this rule back in 2015 when I was just getting started as a content creator. I did return in 2019 under a generic sounding name, and while I had a 4.99 safety rating and wasn't actually causing anyone any issues, some theater kid who roleplayed as a cat girl on YouTube reported me. However, as this video's title implies, this was actually a good thing. Getting banned from iRacing is the best thing that can happen to you as a sim racer, and it makes you a better driver. So there are a couple reasons as to why this is, and I'm going to go through them one by one. For starters, I live in Canada, which is really just America number 2. NASCAR is the most popular form of racing up here, and I was using iRacing as a NASCAR game. And it's very obviously not the first NASCAR game I played either. I had '08 and '09 throughout high school and then was very obviously playing the other console games as I was growing up. What a lot of people don't tell you about the NASCAR gaming scene is that there are several sub-communities within the overall user base. For example, when playing NASCAR '09 online, there are a ton of people who only race Daytona and Talladega. They literally bought this game to race at 2 tracks. If you wanted to race, say, the nationwide cars at Indianapolis Raceway Park, good luck finding a lobby. This was also present in iRacing. C fixed at a 1.5 mile speedway or a super speedway always pops off. The moment, however, you want to try and run a car that takes a lot more skill, such as the super late model or the K&N car at a short track, you were lucky to have more than 12 or 14 people in a race. Now keep in mind, I was active on iRacing during the early years of its lifespan, so the user base back then wasn't where it is today. But I can still see traces of this whenever my buddy runs like a NASCAR Legends race and he only has one split. Among NASCAR fans, there's a tangible aversion to driving any car-track combination that is perceived as being even remotely difficult. It's normalized people skipping races at tracks like Bristol or Martinsville. It's normalized people opting not to run races in the NASCAR Legends cars because managing your tires is too hard, and road racing is just flat out ignored by a majority of NASCAR fans. Being in a community like this is not how you become a better driver. On the NASCAR side of things, you're surrounded by these people in iRacing. Getting banned from the game got me away from these people. This also feeds into a more complex problem once you start making actual friends with people on iRacing. Because of the amount the game costs and the sunk cost fallacy that develops with this game, a lot of people don't want to play other racing games. With the benefit of hindsight, we now know that after 10 years on the market, Assetto Corsa has established itself as one of the greatest PC racing simulators ever released. Yeah, I have my problems with it, but from a handling standpoint, it's awesome. During the first few years of its lifespan, though, I couldn't get people to play it. We'd all bomb around in a practice server for maybe 30 minutes at a time, and everyone would agree that, yeah, this drive's incredible, but then they would just go back to playing iRacing for the rest of the evening. Which would be really ironic because I'd listen to them for the rest of the night complain about how awful iRacing drove or how they got wrecked by some 3-namer. Being banned from iRacing and forced to break my attachment with my iRating or how much money I'd spent forced me to play every other racing sim on the market, which I don't know if you've noticed, but there's actually a lot of them, and this ended up having just a ton of benefits. First and foremost, it taught me how to road race. Most racing games that come out nowadays, whether it be a mainstream Forza or Gran Turismo title or something more niche like Assetto Corsa and the upcoming Rennsport, they're not NASCAR games, they're European circuit racing games. Me being forced to learn how to road race because I'm not on iRacing with all my NASCAR buddies means I can just jump into pretty much any racing game I want and be immediately proficient at it. It's also introduced me to a ton of different cars and tracks as well. As you can imagine, if you grow up as a NASCAR fan, you really only know of 25 tracks, period. And there's basically one type of car you drive across all NASCAR video games, a stock car. It's 3,400 pounds and makes anywhere from 600 to 750 horsepower. It also hardly turns and doesn't really have any downforce, so good luck. Not being able to play NASCAR with my NASCAR friends truly showed me how diverse the world of auto racing actually is and helped me fall in love with cars that I otherwise wouldn't have known existed because, as I've mentioned earlier in this video, everyone in this kind of NASCAR community has no interest in them. As you're doing this, you're picking up all sorts of different driving skills that are unique to a certain type of car, and you're seeing all these awesome tracks like Spa and the Nürburgring and Long Beach, and you're learning way more than you ever would on an oval. And when you compare this to how your buddies are bombing around on iRacing, they won't even do some races at Bristol or Martinsville because it's too hard, so do you think they'll have any interest in messing around with a Group C car? Of course not. Hell, getting them to buy a different game, period, was a challenge. Yet on my end, when all these new circuit racing sims come out, I'm just in, like I'm there first day. And it's great, and I've got a lot of mileage out of the world of sim racing that way because I can just jump in a sim and go. Being banned from iRacing also forced me once and for all to learn how car setups worked. The average age of an iRacing user is getting younger and younger over the years. People are treating it basically like NASCAR '09 for the computer. iRacing has leaned into their younger user base by implementing more and more fixed setup races and shortening overall race distances. In a lot of other racing sims, this hasn't quite permeated their culture yet. If you wanted to race R-Factor, Assetto Corsa, Project Cars, or Race Room Racing Experience online, 99% of the lobbies or leagues or ranked racing apps you joined were open setup. This was non-negotiable. You had to figure it out. And yeah, it did take me about 6 months to a year until I was comfortable with what I was doing in the garage area. But once you get to that point, that knowledge stays with you for life and can be transferred across every other game. Not only does it add replay value to a racing sim because it effectively turns it into a puzzle game, but if a developer ships a car with a really terrible default setup, which happens a lot in this industry, or you just want your car to handle a certain way in a certain corner, you can do that. By comparison, there's really no incentive to do this in iRacing's ecosystem at all because so much of the service revolves around fixed setup racing, including a lot of private leagues. Unless you're trying to make a genuine shot at the esports scene, you have no reason to ever touch your car setup, and as a result, the community's instead developed a lot of animosity towards open setup racers, always using the excuse that they simply don't have time to work on a car setup each week. Being involved in a group that whines at the prospect of having to work on their car setup in a hardcore racing simulator does not make you a better driver. Being banned from iRacing and not being able to take part in an ecosystem that has an abundance of fixed setup races forced me to learn how car setups work. Another benefit of not being on iRacing, and this is something I talked about earlier in the year, is that it forced me to scale back my sim racing to a more acceptable level. The way iRacing is structured as a service and as a game inadvertently creates a lot of toxicity. They've promoted their game so well that they just have a ton of users. Races go off literally every hour in every type of car imaginable. There's an ELO rank and licensing rank system that both, in my opinion, work very well. It's an incentive to keep playing and getting better at the game, and they do dangle the esports carrot in front of a lot of its younger users. This creates a perfect storm where it's very, very easy to get sucked into no-lifing iRacing. I was lucky that I got into iRacing when I was a teenager and just worked a shitty part-time job, so I had this level of free time and disposable income to just hang out and play race car games. But I personally know some people who got really carried away with it. And that was basically all they did. I mean, it was to the point where guys would sit on TeamSpeak for 8 to 12 hours at a time just running race after race after race until one of them got tired or rage quit. And then they would just do it all again the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. This made the racing arguably worse too because they were running so many races that instead of treating their car like it was a real car, which is the point of sim racing, they drive in this overly hyper-aggressive fashion and wreck a bunch of cars because they knew there was another race in 30 minutes anyway. Being banned from iRacing got me out of this extremely toxic environment and forced me to treat it how we used to treat sim racing, where you had a big league race once or twice a week. And then in the interim, your schedule was cleared up to play whatever other game you wanted in the meantime or just do something else altogether. Suddenly I had all the time in the world to mess around running a blog or starting a YouTube channel. And my entire career trajectory nowadays is literally based on the fact that I'm no longer just sitting around grinding out pointless K&N car races for trace amounts of iRating. However, the biggest benefit that came with getting banned from iRacing was how it improved my results in the real world. Their game, for the longest period of time, handled so poorly and so detached from what an actual car with rubber tires handled that I got better once I stopped playing their game. I'll let this Joseph guy explain it here.
But the good thing about real life is you can control the race car a lot better than on this sim. So the tire has a lot more it has a lot more room for sliding, so you can slip the tire a lot more. It's a lot more forgiving. In this game, if the tire gets overslipped, it just wrecks immediately. You just spin. There's no recovering, there's no controlled slide. In a real Indy car, you can control a slide, and it can be quick. So you can drive a very loose car in real life and slide the rear a lot, get a lot more slip into the tire without losing grip or time.
iRacing was so unforgiving to drive when hustling the car that you had to intentionally underdrive the car all the time and basically put around the track at 80% speed. If you pushed at all or tried to yaw the car out to chase someone down, you would just wreck. This is not how any sort of rubber tire operates, and as a result, iRacing was teaching me how to drive a race car incorrectly. Every other European road racing sim that I was now forced to play because I was banned from iRacing modeled this behavior correctly. Hustling a car and pushing for those extra couple of tenths is fun, it's intuitive, it's exciting, and it's something you need to know how to do on command to be fast at any level of racing, even if it's just amateur short track racing. The moment I was forced to play stuff like Assetto Corsa or Race Room Racing Experience regularly because I was banned from iRacing, I got extremely comfortable doing this regularly, and my car control ability skyrocketed. There are some pretty awesome shots of me taken throughout the years where I'm either dead sideways or very obviously entering the corner with the rear end yawed out, and nothing bad came of it, and it just resulted in a bunch of race wins and a couple provincial championships. iRacing, by comparison, told me that this was not possible, that breathing on the rear end in the wrong way results in a wreck. So, thank you, iRacing. I am literally a successful amateur racer here in my province because you banned me from your simulator, which you claimed was this highly accurate training tool, and forced me to play your competitors' products. If I underdrove the car the way you're mandated to in iRacing to prevent from spinning out, I don't think I would have ever won a race. In fact, I would have been so scared of the rear end just randomly coming around on me and destroying my car that I don't think I would have even started racing in real life at all.